The morning of December 15th arrived with the kind of crisp winter air that made the grounds of Adelaide Cottage sparkle like something from a fairy tale. Catherine, the Princess of Wales, stood at her kitchen window, watching her 3 children play in the garden while their protection officers maintained a respectful distance. The scene looked perfect from the outside. But those closest to the royal family knew that this Christmas season carried unusual weight. For months, the Wales family had been navigating waters more turbulent than the public realized. Behind the carefully orchestrated public appearances and the traditional royal calendar, Catherine and William had been having conversations that would have surprised even their most devoted supporters. These weren't discussions about state duties or charitable patronages, but deeply personal conversations about authenticity, vulnerability, and what it truly meant to serve in the modern age. The catalyst for these conversations had been an unexpected moment 3 weeks earlier. Catherine had been visiting a children's hospital in London, following the usual protocol of meeting patients, speaking with staff, and offering comfort where she could. During what should have been a routine visit, she encountered 8-year-old Sophie, a patient undergoing treatment for a rare condition. When Sophie asked Catherine if she ever felt scared, the princess found herself momentarily speechless. The question itself wasn't unusual. Children often ask direct, innocent questions that cut through royal formality. But something in Sophie's eyes, a mixture of genuine curiosity and her own vulnerability, made Catherine pause. For a split second, she considered giving the usual royal response about feeling privileged to serve and finding strength in duty. Instead, she found herself saying something entirely different. "Yes, Sophie, I do feel scared sometimes," Catherine had answered, sitting down to bring herself to the child's eye level. "Being a mom can be scary because you want to protect your children from everything. But you can't always do that. And sometimes I worry about doing the right thing in my job, just like you might worry about a test at school." The honesty in that moment created something magical. Sophie's face lit up with understanding, and for the next 10 minutes, they talked not as princess and patient, but as 2 people sharing genuine concerns and hopes. When Catherine left that day, she carried with her the profound realization that her most meaningful royal moment hadn't involved any royal protocol at all. That evening, she shared the experience with William over dinner after the children had gone to bed. They talked late into the night about the expectations placed upon them, the carefully maintained distance that royal protocol demanded, and whether that distance was actually serving the people they were meant to help. William, who had spent his entire adult life balancing the weight of his future kingship with his desire to live authentically, understood immediately what Catherine was describing. He had his own moments of questioning, times when he wondered whether the formal traditional approach to royal duty was truly the most effective way to connect with and serve the people. The conversation that night marked the beginning of what palace staff would later quietly refer to as the Christmas transformation. Over the following weeks, Catherine and William began discussing how they might approach their Christmas message differently. Previous royal Christmas messages had followed a predictable format: reflection on the year, acknowledgement of challenges, expressions of gratitude, and warm wishes for the season. But this year felt different to them. The world had been through unprecedented challenges, and they sensed that people were longing for something more genuine than carefully crafted royal pleasantries. They wanted to speak not just as representatives of the crown, but as people who had experienced their own struggles, doubts, and growth. The planning for their Christmas message began in earnest in early December. Usually, such messages were carefully scripted affairs, reviewed by multiple palace officials and refined until every word served both personal expression and institutional expectations. This time, Catherine and William requested something unusual. They wanted to write the first draft themselves, without input from communications staff. Their children, George, Charlotte, and Louis, unknowingly became part of this transformation process. During family dinners and weekend activities, the children would share stories about their school friends, their worries about tests or friendships, and their excitement about Christmas plans. Catherine and William found themselves paying closer attention to these conversations, recognizing in their children's openness something they had gradually lost in their own public lives. One evening, 9-year-old George asked his father why adults had to be so serious all the time. The question came after George had watched his parents preparing for a formal engagement, observing the way they transformed from relaxed parents into perfectly composed royal figures. William explained about duty and responsibility, but George's next comment stopped him short. "But Dad, don't people want to know you're like them sometimes? My teacher says her students learn better when she tells them about making mistakes too." Out of the mouths of children came wisdom that years of royal training hadn't provided. That night, William shared George's observation with Catherine, and they both recognized that their son had identified something crucial. People don't just want to admire their royals from a distance. They want to feel connected to them as fellow human beings. The week before their Christmas message was to be recorded, Catherine and William did something unprecedented. They cleared their official calendar for 2 entire days and spent the time with their family, away from all royal duties and obligations. They wanted to reconnect with the feelings and experiences that made them who they were beneath their titles. During those 2 days, they baked Christmas cookies with the children, walked the grounds of their home without photographers or official documentation, and had long conversations about their hopes for their family and their future service. They also spent time individually in reflection, considering what message they truly wanted to share with the world. Catherine found herself thinking about all the people she had met during her royal engagements who had shared their struggles with her. She realized that while she had offered sympathy and support, she had rarely shared her own experiences of difficulty or growth. The traditional royal approach demanded that she remain above such personal revelations, but she was beginning to question whether that approach truly served anyone. William spent his reflection time considering his role as future king and what kind of monarch he wanted to be. His father, King Charles, had blazed his own trail by speaking openly about causes that mattered to him, even when those positions were initially controversial. William wondered whether his generation of royals might be called to an even greater level of openness and authenticity. When they came together to finalize their Christmas message, they had made a decision that would surprise their staff, delight their supporters, and set a new direction for their public service. They would speak not just as the Prince and Princess of Wales, but as William and Catherine, as parents, as people who had faced challenges and learned from them, as individuals committed to serving others while remaining true to themselves. The setting for their message was chosen with equal care. Instead of one of the grand staterooms typically used for royal addresses, they selected a smaller, more intimate space in their home. The room they chose had family photographs on the side tables, children's artwork displayed on a bulletin board, and the comfortable, lived-in feeling of an actual family home. Their communications team initially expressed concerns about this departure from tradition, but Catherine and William remained firm in their decision. They explained that this Christmas message was intended to mark the beginning of a new chapter in their service, one characterized by greater openness, authenticity, and connection with the people they served. As the recording date approached, word began to leak within palace circles that this Christmas message would be different from previous ones. Staff members who had worked with the royal family for years sensed a change in the couple's approach, though the specifics remained closely guarded. The transformation Catherine and William were preparing to reveal had been months in the making, but its roots went deeper than even they initially realized. Both had experienced the isolation that can come with royal life, the way protocol and tradition can create barriers between royals and the very people they exist to serve. But they had also seen, through their charitable work and public engagements, the profound impact that genuine human connection could have. Their decision to embrace greater openness wasn't made lightly. They understood that with authenticity comes vulnerability, and with vulnerability comes the possibility of criticism or misunderstanding. But they had also come to believe that the potential for deeper, more meaningful service was worth those risks. As Catherine stood at her kitchen window that December morning, watching her children play in the garden, she felt a mixture of nervousness and excitement about the message they would soon share with the world. She knew that once they spoke these words, there would be no going back to the more distant, formal approach that had characterized much of royal communication in the past. But she also knew that the decision felt right in a way that their previous, more traditional approaches never quite had. The Christmas message they were preparing to deliver would be more than seasonal greetings. It would be an invitation for people to see them, and perhaps the monarchy itself, in a completely new light. The morning of December 20th dawned gray and misty, the kind of weather that seemed to match the nervous energy coursing through Adelaide Cottage. Catherine woke before her alarm, her mind already racing through the events planned for the day. Today was the day they would record their Christmas message, the message that would signal a dramatic departure from decades of royal tradition. William was already awake, sitting by the bedroom window with a cup of tea, looking out at the grounds where morning mist clung to the ancient oak trees. They had both slept restlessly, not from doubt about their decision, but from the weight of what they were about to undertake. They were preparing to change not just how they communicated with the public, but how they understood their roles as members of the royal family. Over breakfast, their children sensed the unusual energy in the house. Charlotte, perceptive as always, asked her mother why she seemed nervous. Catherine knelt down to her daughter's level, a gesture that had become natural to her after her conversation with Sophie at the hospital. Sometimes, darling, when you're going to do something important that might help other people, it can make you feel nervous and excited at the same time, Catherine explained. Your father and I are going to talk to many people today, and we want to make sure we say exactly the right things. George, munching on his toast, looked up with interest. Are you going to tell them about how you help us when we're scared of things? The innocent question struck both parents. Out of the mouths of their children came the very heart of what they were trying to achieve. They wanted to show the world that being royal didn't mean being perfect or untouchable, but rather being committed to service while remaining genuinely human. After breakfast, the children were taken to school by their protection officers, leaving Catherine and William alone to prepare for the day ahead. They had requested that the recording team be kept small, just the essential technical staff and their most trusted communications advisor, who had initially been skeptical of their approach but had gradually come to understand their vision. The morning was spent in final preparations, but these weren't the usual rehearsals of carefully scripted remarks. Instead, Catherine and William spent time in quiet conversation, ensuring they were both comfortable with the personal elements they planned to share. They had agreed that the message should feel like a conversation with friends, rather than a formal address. Their communications advisor, Sarah, arrived at mid-morning to review the technical arrangements and offer final support. She had worked with the royal family for over a decade, and had never seen a Christmas message prepared in quite this way. Usually, such addresses went through multiple drafts and rehearsals with every gesture and inflection carefully planned. This time, Catherine and William had requested minimal scripting, preferring to speak from notes that captured the key themes they wanted to address. Are you certain about this approach? Sarah asked gently as they reviewed the simple set they had chosen. Once this airs, it will set expectations for how you communicate going forward. William nodded thoughtfully. That's exactly what we're hoping for, Sarah. We want to set a new expectation, one where people see us as accessible and genuine rather than distant and formal. Catherine added, We've spent months thinking about this. Every engagement we've attended, every conversation we've had with the people we're supposed to serve, has reinforced our feeling that authenticity creates deeper connections than perfect protocol ever could. The recording was scheduled for mid-afternoon, when the natural light in their chosen room would be at its most flattering. The technical crew arrived quietly, setting up their equipment with the minimal disruption that comes from years of experience working in royal residences. But even these seasoned professionals sensed something different about this recording session. As the afternoon approached, Catherine and William took a few minutes alone together in the room where they would record their message. The space felt intimate and personal, filled with the comfortable touches that made it unmistakably a family home. Children's drawings were visible in the background, family photographs sat naturally on surfaces, and the overall atmosphere was one of warmth rather than grandeur. Standing together in that room, they both felt the significance of what they were about to do. They weren't just changing how they communicated, they were potentially changing the future of royal engagement with the public. The monarchy had survived and thrived for centuries by adapting to changing times, and they believed this moment required another adaptation. When the recording began, something remarkable happened. The nervous energy that had characterized the morning transformed into something else entirely, a sense of purpose and clarity. Catherine and William found themselves speaking not to cameras and future audiences, but to the individuals they had met throughout their years of service, the people whose stories had moved them and whose struggles they wanted to acknowledge. They began by speaking about the year that was ending, but instead of the usual royal review of official engagements and state occasions, they talked about the moments that had truly mattered to them. Catherine shared the story of her conversation with Sophie at the hospital, speaking openly about how the child's question had challenged her to think differently about vulnerability, and strength. We often think that serving others means having all the answers, Catherine said, looking directly into the camera with genuine warmth. But sometimes the most meaningful service comes from admitting that we're still learning, still growing, still finding our way through challenges just like everyone else. William spoke about the conversations with their children that had shaped his thinking about leadership and authenticity. He shared George's question about why adults had to be so serious all the time, and how it had made him reconsider what kind of father and future king he wanted to be. Our children have taught us that people connect with honesty, William said. They've shown us that admitting uncertainty or sharing struggles doesn't make someone weak. It makes them relatable and trustworthy. As they continued, both Catherine and William felt a sense of freedom they had rarely experienced in their public roles. They were saying things they had thought about for months, expressing feelings and insights that had been carefully contained within the boundaries of royal protocol. For the first time in a formal address, they felt like they were being completely themselves. They spoke about their marriage, not in the usual terms of representing the crown together, but as two people who had learned to support each other through the unique challenges of their position. They acknowledged that royal life came with pressures and expectations that could be overwhelming, and that they had needed to learn how to maintain their relationship and their individual identities within those constraints. We've learned that the strongest service comes from the strongest relationships, Catherine said, reaching over to briefly touch William's hand in a gesture that was entirely natural and unscripted. And the strongest relationships are built on honesty about both struggles and joys. The most powerful moment in their message came when they directly addressed the people watching. Instead of the traditional royal approach of speaking to the nation or the Commonwealth, they spoke to individuals. They acknowledged that everyone faces difficulties, that everyone sometimes feels uncertain or overwhelmed, and that these shared human experiences were what truly connected them to the people they served. If you're watching this and feeling alone in your struggles, please know that you're not, William said with obvious sincerity. Catherine and I have faced our own moments of doubt and difficulty. We've had to learn how to ask for help, how to admit when we don't know something, and how to keep going when things feel overwhelming. Catherine continued, what we've discovered is that these challenges don't make us less capable of serving others. They make us more understanding of what service actually means. They help us connect with the real experiences of the people we're privileged to work with. As they concluded their message, both Catherine and William felt something they had never experienced in previous formal addresses. Complete satisfaction with what they had shared. They had spoken their truth, shared their genuine experiences, and offered authentic connection rather than polite distance. When the recording ended, the room was unusually quiet. The technical crew, accustomed to the formal atmosphere of traditional royal communications, seemed to sense that they had witnessed something unprecedented. Sarah, their communications advisor, had tears in her eyes. That was beautiful, she said simply. It was real in a way that I've never seen in a royal address. As evening fell and the crew packed up their equipment, Catherine and William spent time debriefing about the experience. They both felt energized rather than drained, excited rather than nervous about how their message would be received. They had no way of knowing as they sat together in their family room that evening, that their Christmas message would spark a global conversation about authenticity in leadership, about the value of vulnerability in public service, and about the possibility of maintaining dignity while embracing genuine humanity. What they did know was that they had been completely true to themselves and their values. They had spoken from the heart about their experiences and their hopes for their service. Whether the public would embrace this new approach remained to be seen, but they felt confident that they had chosen the right path forward. As they tucked their children into bed that night, Charlotte asked whether their important talking had gone well. William smiled and said it had gone better than they could have hoped, because they had been able to say exactly what was in their hearts. The message wouldn't air for another 5 days, but already Catherine and William felt that something fundamental had shifted. They had crossed a bridge from the traditional royal approach to something entirely new, and there would be no going back. Tomorrow would bring the beginning of a new chapter in their service, one characterized by openness, authenticity, and genuine connection with the people whose lives they were committed to touching. The 5 days between recording their Christmas message and its public release passed with an unusual mixture of anticipation and calm for Catherine and William. They had shared something deeply personal with the world, And now they had to wait to see how that vulnerability would be received. During those quiet December days, as Christmas preparations continued around them, they found themselves approaching their regular duties with a new sense of freedom. Their first public engagement after recording the message was a visit to a homeless shelter in London, an annual Christmas tradition that had always held special meaning for both of them. But this year, something was different about how they interacted with the people they met. The conversations they had shared during their Christmas recording seemed to have unlocked something within them, allowing for connections that felt deeper and more genuine than ever before. At the shelter, Catherine found herself talking with Maria, a mother of two who had recently lost her job and housing. In previous years, Catherine might have offered sympathy and support while maintaining the careful emotional distance that royal protocol typically required. This time she found herself sharing a different kind of response. "I can't imagine how frightening that must be," Catherine said, sitting down beside Maria in the shelter's common area. "As a mother, the thought of not being able to provide security for my children would terrify me. You're incredibly brave for doing everything you can to keep your family together during such a difficult time." The honesty in Catherine's response created an immediate connection. Maria's eyes filled with tears, not of sadness but of relief at being truly seen and understood. They talked for 20 minutes about the challenges of parenting, the fear that comes with uncertainty, and the strength that mothers find when they need to protect their children. William had his own meaningful encounter that day with James, a veteran who had struggled with mental health issues after leaving the military. When James spoke about feeling ashamed of needing help, William responded with an openness that surprised even himself. "I think many of us struggle with that feeling," William said. "I know I've had to learn to ask for help in my own life, and it's never easy. But what I've come to understand is that recognizing when we need support actually takes tremendous courage, not weakness." The conversations at the shelter that day lasted longer than scheduled, but neither Catherine nor William wanted to cut them short. They were discovering that when they approached their engagements with greater authenticity, the people they met responded with their own openness, creating exchanges that were meaningful for everyone involved. Their staff noticed the change immediately. Protection officers who had worked with the couple for years observed that their interactions with the public had become more natural and engaged. Palace staff members commented on how relaxed and energized Catherine and William seemed after their engagements, rather than the polite exhaustion that sometimes followed formal royal duties. The change was also apparent to their children. At dinner that evening, George asked his parents about their day, and they found themselves sharing stories about the people they had met in a way that helped their children understand the real purpose of royal service. "Did you help them feel better?" Charlotte asked when her parents described their conversations at the shelter. "I think we helped each other feel better," Catherine answered thoughtfully. "Sometimes the best way to help people is to let them know they're not alone in their feelings." As Christmas Eve approached, anticipation about their upcoming message began to build both within their family and among their staff. Early previews had been shared with senior palace officials, and the response had been overwhelmingly positive, though some expressed curiosity about how the public would react to such a departure from tradition. Their children were excited about Christmas morning, but they were also curious about the message their parents had recorded. They knew it was important, and they could sense the nervous energy that surrounded its impending release. On December 24th, the day before their message would air, Catherine and William attended Christmas Eve service at St. George's Chapel in Windsor. The familiar ritual of the service, with its ancient words and traditional carols, provided a meaningful contrast to the innovative approach they had taken with their Christmas message. They sat in the chapel where they had been married, surrounded by centuries of royal history, preparing to add their own chapter to that story. During the service, as they listened to readings about hope, love, and the importance of caring for others, both Catherine and William felt confirmed in their decision to speak more openly about their own experiences. The Christmas story itself was about vulnerability and humanity, about divine love expressed through the most human of experiences. After the service, they greeted other attendees with the warmth that had become characteristic of their new approach. Instead of the brief, formal exchanges typical of such occasions, they found themselves having genuine conversations with people about their Christmas plans, their families, and their hopes for the new year. That evening, as they put their children to bed on Christmas Eve, the excitement in the household was palpable. But Beneath the traditional anticipation of Christmas morning lay another kind of excitement about sharing their message with the world the next day. Christmas morning arrived with the chaos and joy typical of any family with 3 young children. Presents were opened, traditional breakfast was enjoyed, and the family spent time together in the relaxed intimacy that Christmas Day allowed. The children were delighted with their gifts, and Catherine and William treasured these moments of ordinary family life that were so precious given their public roles. In the early afternoon, as the family settled down after their Christmas celebration, the time came for their message to air. They gathered together in their living room to watch, something they had never done with previous Christmas addresses. This time they wanted to experience the moment as a family. When their message began to play on television, their children watched with fascination. They had never seen their parents in quite this way before, speaking so openly about their feelings and experiences. George, Charlotte, and Louis listened as their parents talked about learning from children, about the importance of admitting uncertainty, and about finding strength in vulnerability. "That's us they're talking about," Charlotte exclaimed when William mentioned how their children had taught them important lessons about authenticity. As the message continued, Catherine and William found themselves moved by watching their own words. Seeing themselves speak so openly reinforced their conviction that they had chosen the right approach. The people on the screen looked like themselves, sounded like themselves, and expressed thoughts and feelings that truly reflected who they were. When the message ended, their living room was quiet for a moment. Then Louis, their youngest, climbed onto William's lap and said, "Daddy, you looked happy when you were talking." The simple observation from their 5-year-old son captured something profound. They had looked happy because they had been happy, experiencing the joy that comes from authentic self-expression and genuine connection with others. Within hours of the message airing, responses began pouring in from around the world. Social media filled with comments from people who felt touched by the openness and honesty they had witnessed. Traditional media outlets, initially surprised by the departure from royal communication norms, quickly began praising the message as groundbreaking and deeply moving. But the responses that mattered most to Catherine and William came from individuals who shared how the message had affected them personally. Letters and emails arrived from parents who felt less alone in their struggles, from people facing difficulties who felt encouraged by the acknowledgement that everyone faces challenges, and from those who appreciated seeing public figures speak honestly about vulnerability and growth. One letter that particularly moved Catherine came from a teacher who wrote about sharing the message with her class, and how it had sparked conversations among her students about the importance of kindness and understanding. The teacher wrote that the children in her class had been inspired by the idea that even royals face challenges and need support sometimes. William was deeply touched by a message from a veteran who had heard his comments about asking for help. The veteran wrote that hearing a future king speak openly about vulnerability had encouraged him to reach out for the mental health support he had been reluctant to seek. As Christmas Day continued and the responses to their message multiplied, Catherine and William realized that their decision to speak authentically had created connections they could never have anticipated. They had hoped to touch hearts, but they were discovering that their openness was inspiring others to be more open as well. That evening, as they tucked their children into bed after a wonderful Christmas day, Charlotte asked if other people had liked their parents' important talking. "Yes, sweetheart," Catherine said, smoothing her daughter's hair. "I think people liked hearing us talk about real things that matter to everyone." "Will you keep talking like that?" George asked from his bed across the room. William smiled at his son's question. "Yes, George, I think we will. It feels right to be honest about who we are and what we care about." As Catherine and William headed to bed themselves that Christmas night, they both felt a profound sense of satisfaction and anticipation. They had successfully launched a new chapter in their public service, one characterized by authenticity and genuine connection. The warm response to their message suggested that people were hungry for this kind of honest communication from their public figures. But, more than the public response, they were gratified by how right the experience had felt for them personally. They had spoken their truth, shared their genuine experiences, and connected with others in a way that honored both their royal roles and their humanity. They had found a way to serve that felt completely authentic to who they were as individuals, as parents, and as people committed to making a positive difference in the world. Tomorrow would bring the first day of their new approach to royal service, and they were excited to see where this path of greater openness and authenticity would lead them. In the days following Christmas, as the world absorbed Catherine and William's groundbreaking message, something extraordinary began to happen. The response wasn't just positive, it was transformative. Letters, emails, and social media posts poured in from every corner of the globe, but these weren't typical fan messages or formal expressions of support. Instead, they were deeply personal stories from people whose lives had been touched by the honesty they had witnessed. The first indication that their message had created something unprecedented came on December 27, when their private secretary, James, arrived at Adelaide Cottage with an unusual update. The royal household typically received hundreds of letters following any public appearance or message, but this time the volume was different, and more importantly, the content was unlike anything they had seen before. "Your Royal Highnesses," James began, setting down several boxes of correspondence, "we've received over 10,000 letters and emails in the past 2 days, and they're still arriving at an extraordinary rate. But I need to tell you, these aren't ordinary responses to a royal message. People are sharing their own stories, their own struggles, and expressing gratitude for what they're calling permission to be human." Catherine and William spent the afternoon reading through dozens of these letters, and both were moved to tears repeatedly. A single mother from Manchester wrote about how hearing Catherine speak about vulnerability had given her courage to ask her family for help with childcare, so she could return to school. A teenager from Scotland shared how William's comments about learning from uncertainty had helped him feel less ashamed about struggling with anxiety. Perhaps most touching was a letter from an elderly gentleman in Wales who had lost his wife the previous year. He wrote that their Christmas message had been the first time since her death that he had felt understood rather than pitied. He said their acknowledgement that everyone faces difficulties had helped him realize that grief was not something to hide from but something that connected him to the broader human experience. The media response was equally remarkable but in an entirely different way. Traditional royal correspondents, accustomed to analyzing the political and constitutional implications of royal communications, found themselves writing about emotional connection and authentic leadership. International newspapers that typically covered royal news as curiosity items were publishing thoughtful editorial pieces about the potential for public figures to model vulnerability and openness. The most significant media response came from an unexpected source. Mental health professionals began using Catherine and William's message as an example of healthy public discourse about struggle and growth. Dear Sarah Thompson, a prominent psychologist, wrote a widely shared article about how their Christmas message demonstrated the power of leaders acknowledging their own humanity. "What the Prince and Princess of Wales have done is revolutionary in its simplicity," Dr. Thompson wrote. "They have shown that strength comes not from projecting perfection, but from acknowledging shared human experiences. Their willingness to speak about uncertainty and growth gives others permission to do the same." The international response was equally powerful. From Australia came stories of community groups using their message as inspiration for support networks. Canadian schools reported teachers incorporating their themes into discussions about kindness and understanding. American veterans organizations shared how William's openness about asking for help had encouraged their members to seek support. But perhaps the most meaningful responses came from other members of the royal family and the broader aristocratic community. Several younger royals from other European monarchies reached out privately to express how inspired they were by Catherine and William's approach. They spoke about feeling trapped by expectations of perfection and formal distance, and how the Christmas message had shown them a different way forward. Even more surprising were the responses from long-serving members of the British establishment. Palace staff who had worked through multiple generations of royals commented on how refreshing it was to see their duties approached with such genuine warmth and authenticity. Senior courtiers, initially concerned about the departure from tradition, found themselves impressed by the depth and sincerity of the public response. The transformation in Catherine and William's own approach to their duties became immediately apparent in their first public engagement of the new year. They visited a community center in Birmingham that provided support for families facing various challenges. Instead of the usual format of brief, formal interactions, they spent extended time with individuals and families, sharing conversations that built on the openness they had demonstrated in their Christmas message. During their visit, they met the Johnson family, who were dealing with their teenage son's struggle with depression. In previous years, such a conversation might have followed a careful script about the importance of seeking professional help and the availability of resources. This time, Catherine and William found themselves sharing more personal insights. Watching our children grow up has taught us that parenting doesn't come with a manual, Catherine said to Mrs. Johnson as they sat together in a quiet corner of the center. There are days when we worry whether we're doing the right things, saying the right things. I imagine that feeling is even more intense when your child is struggling with something as serious as depression. Mrs. Johnson immediately relaxed, her formal nervousness replaced by genuine engagement. I keep wondering if there's something I should have done differently, she admitted. Everyone says it's not my fault, but it's hard not to feel responsible. William joined the conversation, sharing his own experiences with worry and uncertainty as a parent. I think all parents carry that feeling sometimes, he said. What I'm learning is that our children need to see us as human rather than perfect. Maybe your son needs to know that you struggle with difficult emotions too sometimes. The conversation continued for nearly 30 minutes, with the Johnsons sharing their experiences and Catherine and William offering not expert advice but understanding and support. When they finally moved on to meet other families, Mrs. Johnson told their staff that it was the first time since her son's diagnosis that she had felt truly understood rather than judged. Similar conversations happened throughout their visit. They met single parents, elderly people facing isolation, and young people struggling with employment challenges. In each case, their approach was marked by the same authenticity that had characterized their Christmas message. They listened deeply, shared appropriately from their own experiences, and created connections based on genuine understanding, rather than formal sympathy. The change in their approach was noticed not only by the people they met but by the media covering their engagements. Royal correspondents began writing about the new warmth behind the golden gates of Windsor Castle. A revolution was quietly brewing. Not one of politics or power, but something far more precious, the transformation of two of the world's most watched individuals from distant royal figures into genuine, vulnerable human beings. When Catherine and William stepped before the cameras that December morning, their words would do more than deliver seasonal greetings. They would shatter decades of royal tradition, revealing hearts that had been hidden behind centuries of protocol, and prove that even those born to thrones can choose to live as people first, royals second. What followed their Christmas message wasn't just media coverage. It was a global awakening to the possibility that the monarchy could be both ancient and authentically modern, both regal and remarkably real.